The alien slavers came at dawn. Their ships broke through the sky like black knives, cutting into the silence of the human outpost. The ground shook as their engines roared, and before the people inside could understand what was happening, the attack had already begun. Fire lit the horizon, alarms screamed, and the scent of smoke filled the air. The aliens moved with practiced precision. Their tall, scaled bodies glimmered in the early light, their eyes burning yellow as they forced doors open and dragged humans from their shelters. Chains clattered, metal cuffs snapped tight, and desperate voices cried out. Some humans fought back, but the slavers were stronger, armed with energy rifles and stun weapons that left even the strongest soldier helpless in seconds. Among the captives was one man who did not cry out. He stood in silence while the chains were forced on his wrists. His face carried no fear, no panic. He watched the invaders with steady eyes, as if measuring each of them, as if recording every detail. To the slavers, he looked calm because he was broken. They mistook silence for defeat. The other prisoners noticed him too. While mothers held their children and men shouted in anger, he stood like stone. He did not speak, and yet his stillness made others whisper. Who was he? Why did he not tremble like the rest? No one dared ask, but they felt something strange in his presence, something heavy like a storm that had not yet broken. The aliens dragged the humans through the wreckage toward their transport vessel. The ship loomed above them like a beast with an open mouth. Prisoners stumbled up the ramp, shoved by rough claws and the crack of electric whips. The man walked without resistance, his eyes scanning the shadows inside the ship. The chains on his arms rattled with every step, but he carried them as though they were nothing more than loose rope. Inside, the prisoners were forced into a cold metal hold. The walls were lined with bars, the floor sticky with oil and old blood. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of fear. Children whimpered. Wounded men groaned. The slavers laughed as they locked the cages, speaking in their guttural tongue about how much these humans would fetch on distant markets. One guard stopped in front of the silent man. He struck the bars with his staff and sneered. "You," he hissed in broken English.
"You are weak."
"All humans weak. Soon you work until bones break. Then you die." The man did not respond. His head tilted slightly, his gaze unblinking. The guard snarled in frustration and moved away, muttering insults. The journey into space began. The ship lifted off, leaving behind smoke and ash. The prisoners felt the pull of gravity fade as they rose into the cold void. Time passed slowly. The only sounds were the hum of engines, the footsteps of patrolling guards, and the whispers of captives trying to comfort each other. Yet even here, in chains and silence, the man remained the same, calm, watchful. His eyes studied the vents, the doors, the patterns of the guards. He saw more than anyone else did, and though no one spoke to him, the other prisoners started to notice. Every time his eyes flickered toward something, they looked too. Every time he moved even a little, they grew quiet, waiting. The slavers, arrogant and careless, never looked twice at him. To them he was nothing. Another human body, another price to be collected. They did not know his past. They did not know the weight of his silence. One older prisoner, a soldier from the outpost, whispered softly to another as he stared at the man. "He is not like us," the soldier said. "He has seen war before." "I know that look," the younger prisoner frowned. "But who is he?" The soldier shook his head. "I do not know, but I think the slavers made a mistake." The silent man sat with his back against the wall, chains loose on his arms. The faint light above cast his shadow across the floor, long and sharp like a blade. His breathing was steady. His eyes closed for a moment, but his mind did not rest. He counted steps, measured voices, traced the ship's rhythm. Every detail mattered. Every second brought him closer to what he knew would come. The guards laughed and jeered. They talked about the markets where they would sell the humans, about the profits they would gain. They called humans fragile, weak, unworthy of freedom. They did not notice the way the silent man's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, because he knew something they did not. He had a name, A name that carried fear across battlefields. A name whispered like a warning, like the shadow of death itself. The galaxy had heard it before. The slavers would hear it soon, but not yet. For now, he waited. The chains rattled softly as he shifted his hands, testing their weight. Around him, prisoners huddled in fear, but none could stop glancing his way. They could not explain why, but in his silence there was a promise. Not safety, not hope. Something darker, something sharper. The story of what he would become for them, what he had always been, was only beginning. And when the time came, the slavers would learn the truth. They had not captured a broken human. They had taken the one who was called the Reaper. The journey. The slave ship drifted through the void, far from the burning outpost it had left behind. Stars stretched endlessly outside the small barred windows, but inside the hold there was only darkness and despair. The air grew heavier with each passing hour, filled with the sound of chains scraping against metal and the low groans of the broken. The alien guards paced with slow arrogance. Their scaled feet thudded against the steel floor, claws tapping when they grew restless. Every now and then one would strike the bars with the butt of a weapon, reminding the prisoners of their place. Some humans flinched, some wept quietly, but one man never moved. He sat with his back straight, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. His calm presence disturbed both humans and slavers. The captives could not understand how he could sit so still while doom hung over them. The slavers mocked him, calling him dead inside, but deep within they began to feel unsettled by his silence. During the long journey, whispers spread among the prisoners. At first they spoke of home, of families left behind, of fear for what was to come. Then slowly their eyes turned toward the quiet man. Even without words, he had become a figure in their minds, a question they could not answer. Who was he? Why did his presence feel heavier than chains? The youngest of the captives, a boy barely old enough to fight, dared to ask in a hushed voice, "Sir, what is your name?" The man's head tilted, but he did not answer. The boy lowered his eyes quickly, afraid he had broken something sacred. The silence that followed was louder than any reply. One of the guards overheard and laughed harshly. "Name? Humans do not need names. You are only numbers now." He struck the bars, flashing sharp teeth. "This one will fetch a fine price. Quiet slaves last longer. Easier to train." The other guards agreed, but not all laughed. One kept glancing back at the silent human, his eyes narrowing with unease. Something in the man's stillness pressed against his instincts. Predators knew predators. And this one, though chained, did not feel like prey. Hours became a day. The ship crossed into deeper space, far from any patrol routes. The aliens spoke openly now, safe in the emptiness between stars. They joked about the markets, about how humans would bend under whips, about how fragile human bodies were. Still, the man did not break his silence. He ate little, drank little, spoke not at all. And yet, every prisoner who sat near him felt their fear shift. It was not that they believed he would save them. No, it was something darker. They felt that if he moved, the entire ship would change. In the command chamber, one of the alien officers reviewed the records of the captured humans. He sneered at the names, calling them weak and unimportant. Then his claw paused on one incomplete file. The picture was blurred, the text partly erased. Only fragments remained, combat reports, missing units, unexplained deaths on battlefields. A single word appeared more than once, burned into the data like a warning. "Reaper." The officer frowned and tapped the screen. "Reaper," he muttered, trying to translate it. "What is this?" The younger slaver beside him shrugged. Probably human superstition. They give themselves grand names to feel strong. But the officer did not laugh. His tail twitched with unease. He had fought humans before, and he knew that sometimes names were more than words. They were reputations carved in blood. Back in the cages, the atmosphere grew heavier. One prisoner leaned close to another, whispering through cracked lips. "I think I know him. During the war on Kesra 9, there was talk of a human soldier. They called him Death itself. They said he came from the shadows and left nothing alive. The other prisoners shivered. You think that is him? The first nodded slowly. I think the slavers do not know who they chained. As the hours stretched into night, the ship entered a region of space known for storms. Lightning flared across the void, streaks of blue and white striking against the hull. The engines groaned, lights flickered, and for the first time the slavers looked uneasy. Their technology was strong, but the storm was stronger. The silent man opened his eyes. For the first time since capture, he moved with purpose. His head lifted, and the faintest trace of interest crossed his face. The storm rattled the ship, but inside the hold it rattled something more, the balance of fear. Because when the lights dimmed, when shadows deepened, he was no longer just a man in chains. He looked like something else, something waiting. The prisoners felt it. The guards felt it too, though they tried to hide it behind snarls. In the storm-lit dark, the man's presence grew larger, heavier, as if the ship itself bent around him. He sat still, but every alien on that vessel would remember the weight of that silence. They had captured a human, but they had not captured what lived inside him. The galaxy knew him by one word. The word the officer had seen in half-erased files, the word that the slavers would soon learn, though none of them were ready. Reaper. Revelation begins. The storm outside grew stronger. Lightning lashed across the black void, slamming against the ship's shields. Sparks flickered through the corridors, and the steady hum of engines faltered. The prisoners pressed against the bars, whispering prayers, while the guards muttered curses in their guttural tongue. In the hold, the chains rattled faintly. The silent man opened his eyes again. His gaze was calm, sharper than the storm. He studied the trembling lights above and the vibrations in the floor. He knew what they meant. The ship was strained, distracted, and distraction was an opportunity. A guard marched into the hold, shouting at the prisoners to stay quiet. His voice was rough, his teeth flashing as he struck the bars. But the prisoners were not watching him. Their eyes were fixed on the man who'd begun to shift his hands against his restraints. The guard noticed too late. With a small, precise motion, the man twisted his wrists. The metal groaned, strained, and then snapped with a sharp crack. The guard froze, stunned, his eyes wide. Humans were not supposed to have that strength. Before the alien could shout, the man moved. His hand shot out through the bars, fast as a striking blade. He caught the guard by the throat and pulled with brutal force. The alien slammed against the bars, choking, his weapon clattering to the floor. In one smooth motion, the man seized the staff and silenced the guard forever. The other prisoners stared in horror and awe. They had seen humans fight before, but not like this. He had moved with deadly certainty, without hesitation, without wasted effort. It was not just strength, it was mastery. He turned, sliding the staff between the bars to pry the lock open. The metal screeched before snapping loose. The gate swung wide, and the prisoners gasped as freedom touched their hands for the first time. But the man did not smile, did not speak. He moved with purpose, not joy. "Who are you?" whispered the boy from before, his eyes wide with trembling fear. The man did not answer. Instead, he raised a finger to his lips, a command for silence. The prisoners obeyed without question. Something in his eyes told them that noise would bring death. More guards stormed down the corridor, alerted by the faint sound of metal breaking. The man stepped into the shadows near the corner, his body blending into the darkness. The prisoners pressed back into their cages, pretending nothing had changed. When the first guard entered, his steps heavy and careless, the man struck. The alien did not even see the blur of movement before the staff crushed his chest. The second turned to shout, but a precise strike to the throat silenced him. Their bodies fell before they could fire a single shot. The hold fell silent again, except for the storm outside. The prisoners looked at one another with wide eyes, breathing fast. Their fear of the aliens was shifting into something else, a fear of the human who had just killed so easily, so silently. One of the older prisoners whispered, his voice hoarse. "I have heard stories. They called him Reaper. I did not believe them. Now I do. The name spread through the cages like fire. Reaper. Some said it in awe, some in terror, but all understood the meaning. He was not just a man. He was a weapon given flesh. In the command chamber, alarms began to flash. The officer snarled as reports came in. 2 guards dead, weapons missing. His claws tapped rapidly on the console. He replayed the broken file, the shadow of the human record, and his throat tightened. "Reaper," he whispered again, this time with fear. The younger slaver laughed nervously. "It cannot be. That is a myth. A human ghost story." The officer shook his head. "No, myths do not break chains. Myths do not kill my guards." His voice grew sharp. "Seal the corridors. Lock down the prisoner hold. If this is who I think it is, we may already be dead." Meanwhile, in the lower decks, the Reaper moved like smoke through the ship. Every step was silent, every strike precise. He took weapons from fallen guards, discarding what was clumsy, keeping what was useful. His movements showed knowledge. He knew this kind of ship, knew its blind spots, knew how to use its design against its crew. The storm outside raged louder, but inside the real storm had begun. Guards whispered to one another, their voices shaking. Shadows in the corridors seemed longer now, deeper. Every flicker of failing light made them flinch, expecting the Reaper to appear. Back in the cages, the prisoners sat in silence, waiting, listening. They heard footsteps above, screams cut short, weapons discharging into empty air. They felt the tremors as bodies fell against walls and doors. The boy whispered again, his voice trembling. "He's not saving us, is he?" The older soldier beside him shook his head. "No, he is hunting, and he was right." The Reaper was not freeing slaves. He was not fighting for justice. He was doing what he had always done. He was hunting those who thought they could own him. Every corner of the ship would soon know his name. Every alien on board would soon understand why humans whispered it like a curse, and the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm he carried within. The slave ship had always been a fortress. Thick walls, heavy doors, dozens of guards. No prisoner had ever escaped. No captive had ever fought back. But now, in the middle of a storm, the fortress trembled. It was not the lightning outside that shook the crew. It was something inside, something they could not see. The Reaper had vanished into the shadows of the ship, and one by one, the guards began to disappear with him. At first, the slavers laughed it off. A few missing patrols, a delayed report, nothing serious. But when blood streaked across the corridors, when weapons lay abandoned beside motionless bodies, the laughter ended. Fear took its place. The officer in command shouted orders, his voice sharp with panic. "Seal the lower decks. Double the patrols. Find the human." But doubling the patrols only doubled the number of corpses left behind. The Reaper did not fight with noise. He fought with silence. A guard would step into a hall, and a shadow would fall across him. The next second he was gone. Another would turn a corner and never return. The sound of blasters echoed once or twice, but always ended in silence. The prisoners could hear it all. From inside their cages, they listened to the chaos above. The thud of footsteps running in fear, the scream of slavers cut short, the crackle of energy rifles firing at nothing but shadows. The boy whispered to the soldier again, his voice thin. "Is he killing them all?" The soldier's face was pale in the dim light. "Yes, that is what he does. That is why they call him Reaper." The guards who remained began to grow desperate. They barked orders to one another, their voices trembling. "Stay in pairs! Watch the shadows!" Yet even pairs vanished, 2 at a time, leaving behind only silence and the smell of blood. The storm outside battered the ship, lights flickering, alarms blaring. In that strobe of failing light, the Reaper was everywhere. A shadow moving along the ceiling, a figure slipping between doors, a whisper of chains before a body hit the floor. In the control room, the officer's claws trembled as he held the weapon close. His younger second-in-command tried to stay brave, but his voice betrayed him. "It cannot be just one human. No one can do this." The officer glared at him. "You do not understand. This is not a man. This is a legend. A warning carved into your mind before you ever see his face. He's not prisoner, not soldier. He is death-given form. The younger slaver swallowed hard, his scales shivering. The Reaper moved closer to the command deck. He left a trail of silence behind him. The ship that had once roared with the voices of a proud crew now echoed with nothing but the hum of dying systems and the faint rattle of chains as he walked. He did not hurry. He did not stumble. Every step was measured, every strike final. His eyes were cold, his hands steady. To him, this was not war, not vengeance. It was routine. The prisoners in the hold felt the air shift with every sound of battle above. Some pressed against the bars, praying for rescue. Others shrank back, knowing that rescue was never his goal. The boy asked one last time, his voice a thin thread, "Will he come for us?" The soldier shook his head. He does not save, he hunts. And we are not his target. The truth of those words sank into the boy's heart like ice. Above, the hunt neared its end. The slavers had nowhere left to run. The storm outside still clawed at the ship, but inside the true storm moved with silent steps and blood-stained hands. One alien, shaking, dropped his weapon and ran down a corridor. He thought he could escape. He thought he could hide. But the moment he reached the end of the hall, the Reaper was there, waiting. His face half lit in the storm's glow, his shadow stretching across the wall like a beast. The alien froze. The weapon clattered from his claws. He tried to speak, but no words came. The Reaper stepped forward, slow, deliberate. His eyes locked on the slaver's face, and in that moment, the alien understood why the galaxy whispered his name like a curse. The lights flickered once more, and then the hall fell silent. The legend had come alive again, and the slave ship had become his hunting ground. The ending. The slave ship was no longer a vessel of power. It had become a tomb, drifting through the storm. The corridors, once filled with the sound of arrogant voices, now carried only silence broken by the hum of dying lights. The Reaper had cut through the crew with precision, leaving no one untouched by his shadow. In the control room, the officer stood alone. His claws gripped the console, his chest rising and falling fast. He had sent orders, begged for reports, demanded answers. None had come. Every channel was empty. Every voice was gone. He felt it before he heard it, the presence behind him heavy as the void. Slowly he turned, and there he was. The human stood in the doorway, framed by flickering lights, a stolen weapon resting loosely in his hand. His face was calm, untouched by fear or fury. The officer tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His body screamed to flee, yet there was nowhere to run. He knew that if he raised his weapon, he would not live long enough to fire. The Reaper stepped forward. His voice came at last, low and steady, the first words he had spoken since capture. "You made a mistake." The officer trembled, his scales shivering. "You cannot kill us all," he managed to rasp. The Reaper's eyes were cold, his tone flat. "I already did." The lights flickered one final time, and the officer's scream was swallowed by silence. Below, the prisoners huddled together in the hold, their ears straining for any sound that might tell them what was happening above. Then the heavy doors groaned open, and footsteps echoed. The man stepped inside, the chains gone from his wrists, his figure marked with shadows. The prisoners gasped, pulling back in fear. For a moment no one spoke. His eyes swept over them, and the weight of that gaze pressed like steel against their hearts. At last, he unlocked the cages. The doors swung wide, the chains falling away. But he did not smile, did not offer comfort. His movements were mechanical, efficient. One of the captives whispered, "You saved us." The Reaper shook his head. "I did not save you. I ended them." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of final judgment. The prisoners stepped out cautiously, their eyes never leaving him. Some wanted to thank him, but the words stuck. Gratitude felt wrong in the presence of something that was not truly human anymore. He led them to the command deck, where he forced the dying ship into a controlled course. With quick, sharp motions, he rerouted the systems, guiding the vessel toward the nearest human sector. He did not speak while he worked, and no one dared interrupt him. When it was done, he turned back to them. "This ship will reach human space. When it does, You will be free." The boy who had asked his name before stepped forward, his small voice trembling. "What should we tell them? Who freed us?" The Reaper paused. For a moment the silence stretched so long that the boy thought he would not answer. Then finally he spoke. "Tell them nothing. The galaxy already knows my name." He stepped past them, into the corridor still wet with blood, and vanished into the shadows of the ship. No one followed. No one asked where he was going. Some said later that he left in an escape pod, others that he disappeared into the void itself. When the ship finally limped into human-controlled space, the survivors told their story. They spoke of the slavers who had fallen silent one by one. They spoke of a man who moved like death itself. They spoke of chains that could not hold him, guards who could not stop him, and an officer who had whispered a single word before he died. Reaper. The story spread like fire. Across stations, across fleets, across worlds, the name carried. Slavers spoke it with fear, soldiers with respect, and civilians with unease. Some called him a monster, others a savior, but all agreed on one thing. He was not just human. He was the shadow that walked beside death, and so the legend grew. They had enslaved a man, but what they had truly taken was the Reaper. And in doing so, they had sealed their own fate.